The godfather of Mexican narcos, the rise and fall of Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo. The sun sets over 1970s Mexico, casting shadows over a landscape plagued by corruption, poverty, and growing whispers of a thriving underground drug trade. Amidst this chaos, one man begins to rise, a man who would become known as both a visionary leader and a ruthless criminal. His name, Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo, infamously called El Padrino, the Godfather. Imagine bustling city streets, teeming with opportunity and danger, where politicians, law enforcement, and criminals walk the fine line between survival and betrayal. This is the backdrop against which Gallardo's story unfolds, an empire built not just on drugs, but on ambition, manipulation, and bloodshed. Today, we dive into the gripping saga of the man who is said to have laid the foundation for modern Mexican cartels, the rise, the reign, and the inevitable fall of Felix Gallardo. Before Gallardo emerged, Mexico's drug trade was chaotic and fractured. Local growers boasted small operations, while territorial disputes often led to violent clashes. There was no vision, no mastermind to unite these warring factions into a single cohesive empire. Felix Gallardo saw an opening. A former state police officer, Gallardo was no stranger to corruption and power dynamics. He understood Mexico's weaknesses and found a way to exploit them. Unlike the brash, gun-slinging kingpins of his generation, Gallardo was different. He wasn't just a criminal, he was a strategist. Picture this, a round table of rival drug lords, united under one banner. For the first time in Mexican history, the drug trade was centralized, a monopoly under the newly founded Guadalajara cartel. And at the head of this operation stood Gallardo. Through shrewd negotiations, he managed to unite Mexico's fragmented drug operations, creating a supply chain that rivaled any multinational corporation. Gallardo's vision extended far beyond marijuana, a cash crop that had sustained Mexico's drug economy for years. His most audacious move? Partnering with Colombian cartels to smuggle cocaine into the United States, a market hungry for the product. Under his leadership, the Guadalajara cartel skyrocketed in power and influence, becoming a dominant force in the international drug trade. Felix Gallardo's inner circle was vital to his success. Two names stand out: Rafael Caro Quintero, a volatile and brash figure heavily involved in marijuana cultivation, and Ernesto Don Neto Fonseca, the elder statesman of the group. Together, they shared power while relying on Gallardo's quiet leadership to keep their operations intact. What separated these men from the rest of Mexico's criminal underworld was their shared understanding. Unity meant survival. Under Gallardo's rule, violence was to be minimized. In this sense, he saw the organization as an empire, not gangs running wild, but a business. For a while, it worked. To sustain this empire required more than just drugs. Gallardo mastered the art of manipulation, creating a web of corruption so intricate that even the Mexican government bent to his will. Bribes flowed like rivers. Politicians, police, and even military leaders became pawns in his grand chess game. This wasn't just smart business, it was genius. Gallardo made the cartel untouchable. He played Mexico's systems against themselves, blurring the line between the legitimate and the illicit. Anyone questioning his authority was silenced by bribes or by bullets. By the mid-1980s, the Guadalajara cartel was a multi-billion-dollar empire. Huge quantities of drugs crossed the US-Mexico border daily, propelled by partnerships with Pablo Escobar and other Colombian kingpins. Gallardo's empire wasn't just about scale, it was about sophistication. He utilized secret airstrips, corrupt customs officials, and intricate trafficking networks to ensure smooth operations. But while Gallardo amassed unimaginable wealth and power, his life away from crime painted a drastically different picture. To his family, he was a gentle, loving man, a stark contrast to the calculated and ruthless figure he portrayed in the underworld. This double life only added to the mystique surrounding him. As Gallardo's empire flourished, international attention grew. In the US, the DEA started piecing together the shadowy figures behind the cartel's operations. Among them was DEA agent Enrique "Kiki" Camarena, a man whose tenacity and courage would become legend. But Camarena's efforts didn't go unnoticed. Felix Gallardo, known for his calculated decisions, felt increasingly threatened. What came next would not only change the course of his empire, but also bring the full weight of two nations' wrath upon him. In February 1985, Felix Gallardo made a decision that would become his greatest misstep. Camarena was abducted, tortured, and eventually murdered, a brutal act sanctioned by Gallardo himself. The decision came out of fear, desperation, and the belief that eliminating Camarena would solve the cartel's problems. But the murder, instead of silencing US efforts, ignited a storm of fury. Camarena's death shocked the United States, sparking Operation Leyenda, the largest DEA manhunt in history. Suddenly, Gallardo found himself at the center of an international firestorm. As the DEA intensified their operations, Gallardo's once unified cartel began to crumble. Allies turned on each other, haunted by paranoia and the growing pressure from authorities. Gallardo, long accustomed to control, found himself increasingly out of his depth as internal betrayals and external forces spiraled out of his control. Where once Gallardo had sought to minimize violence, now bloodshed erupted. The cartel fractured, giving rise to smaller, more aggressive factions that would later dominate Mexico's drug trade. For Gallardo, the end was near. In 1989, Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo was arrested in his home. After years of evading law enforcement, the man who had built an empire was finally in chains. His downfall shocked the nation. For years he had seemed invincible, untouchable. In court, Gallardo sat stoic, refusing to cooperate. His trial was a spectacle, revealing the deep ties between the cartel and Mexican officials. When the dust settled, Gallardo was sentenced to decades in prison, a far cry from the empire he once ruled. Even in prison, Gallardo's influence lingered. The blueprint he had established for the Guadalajara cartel didn't die with his arrest. Instead, it sowed the seeds for the next generation of cartels. But if Gallardo hoped for a quiet life behind bars, he was mistaken. Aging and in poor health, he watched as his empire dissolved into infamy and as new cartels unleashed more violence than he ever could have imagined. While Gallardo leaves behind a legacy of crime and corruption, another figure emerged as a symbol of justice: Enrique Camarena. His death galvanized efforts to combat drug cartels on both sides of the border. Today, Kiki's name stands as a reminder of the sacrifice individuals make in the fight against organized crime. Gallardo's empire may have fallen, but his legacy shaped the future of Mexico's drug trade. The smaller, deadlier factions that emerged after the Guadalajara cartel are a testament to the unintended consequences of his centralization efforts. Drug violence escalated, and Mexico remains plagued by the successes and missteps of El Padrino. In the end, Gallardo's story is one of duality. A man who sought order amidst chaos, but created even greater destruction. A family man who betrayed others without hesitation, an architect of an empire that outlived him in both influence and infamy. His empire fell, but the shadows it cast remain etched in Mexico's history. The question we're left with is this: was Gallardo's ambition worth the human cost? Or is his legacy one of regret wrapped in the illusion of power? As the credits roll on El Padrino's life, one thing is certain: his story will continue to echo into the future, haunting the corridors of power, greed, and human ambition.